I am Clarence, 35 years old, and I once believed family meant unconditional love. Growing up, my sister Amanda and I were inseparable, building forts and sharing secrets. That made it all the more devastating when my parents sat me down last spring and said the words that shattered everything. The greatest gift for your sister's wedding would be if I disappeared from our family forever. I did not beg. I simply packed my things, took the keys, and walked out the door, closing behind me like a final punctuation mark. Before I tell you how I rebuilt my life from scratch after my own family discarded me, drop a comment, letting me know where you are watching from. And hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up for yourself when nobody else would. Growing up in suburban Boston, my childhood seemed picture perfect from the outside. Our colonial-style home with its neatly trimmed hedges and swing set in the backyard was the setting for what I thought was a loving family. My father Howard worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm, while my mother Dorothy taught piano lessons from our living room. Amanda came along when I was 4, and from the moment my parents brought her home, I appointed myself her personal protector. As kids, Amanda and I were practically joined at the hip. We built elaborate Lego cities that took over the basement for weeks. During summers, we spent hours catching frogs at the creek behind our house, making up stories about their secret frog societies. I taught her to ride a bike in the cul-de-sac, running alongside her until she found her balance. When thunderstorms hit and she was scared, she would sneak into my room, and I would make up adventure stories until she fell asleep. Our family dynamics seemed normal to me then, but looking back, the signs were always there. My father had impossibly high expectations, especially for me, as the only son. A 98% on a math test would earn a frown, and the question, why not 100? Meanwhile, my mother was a people pleaser to her core, always worried about appearances and what the neighbors might think. The favoritism toward Amanda was subtle at first. On Christmas mornings, her pile of presents was always slightly larger. When we both participated in school events, my mother would capture every second of Amanda's performances on video, while mine might get a few snapshots. If we both had activities on the same day, they would inevitably attend hers. I told myself this was because she was younger and needed more support. Despite the uneven attention, I thrived academically. I won the state science fair 3 years running with projects on renewable energy. I graduated as valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to MIT for computer science. My parents attended my graduation, of course, but their congratulations felt perfunctory. My father commented more on my classmates who had received job offers from Google than on my own achievements. After college, I launched my own tech startup developing security software for small businesses. The early years were lean, and my parents never missed an opportunity to suggest I should have taken a stable corporate job instead. Even when my company began turning a profit and attracting serious investors, they seemed unimpressed, changing the subject whenever I shared good news about the business. When Amanda called to announce her engagement to Jackson Williams, son of a prominent Boston family with connections to old money and politics, my parents' reaction was entirely different. My mother cried tears of joy on the phone. My father immediately offered to pay for the entire wedding, something he had never done when I had mentioned possibly proposing to my college girlfriend years earlier. I was genuinely happy for Amanda. Jackson seemed like a good guy, thoughtful, and clearly in love with my sister. When she asked me to meet them for dinner to celebrate, I brought champagne and heartfelt congratulations. I even offered to help with the wedding technology needs, setting up a custom website and digital invitation system. Amanda hugged me tightly and said she would love that. But as the wedding planning began in earnest, something shifted. My offers to help went from being enthusiastically accepted to politely declined. When I called to ask about the website design preferences, my calls went straight to voicemail. Family dinners became consumed with wedding talk. But whenever I tried to contribute to the conversation, my input was quickly dismissed or ignored. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. This was Amanda's big day after all. It was not about me. But when the 6-month countdown to the wedding began, I could no longer pretend everything was normal. The first major red flag appeared when I learned about the engagement party through social media. Scrolling through Instagram one Sunday morning, I saw photos of my sister Jackson, my parents, and about 50 other people celebrating at an upscale restaurant downtown. There were ice sculptures, champagne towers, and personalized party favors. Everyone was dressed to the nines, looking like they had stepped out of a wedding magazine. Everyone except me, because I had never received an invitation. I called Amanda immediately, trying to keep my voice casual as I asked about the party. There was a long pause before she answered. "Oh, that was more of a thing for Jackson's family," she said, her voice unnaturally high. "Mostly his parents, friends, and business associates. You would have been bored." "But Mom and Dad were there," I pointed out. "Well, they needed to meet the Williams side properly," she replied quickly. "It was all very last minute." I knew she was lying. Nothing about those elaborate decorations had been last minute. The following week, I stopped by my parents' house unannounced, something I rarely did. As I approached the front door, I overheard my mother on the phone through the open window. "Yes, Margaret, the wedding planning is going wonderfully," she was saying. "The Williams are so particular about every detail, but we want everything to be perfect." She lowered her voice. "We are just being careful about certain elements that might not fit with their expectations. You know how these old families can be." I froze on the porch, a sick feeling spreading through my chest. Was I one of those elements that did not fit? When I entered, my mother jumped quickly, ending her call. Our conversation was strained, with her repeatedly mentioning how busy she was with wedding preparations. Not once did she ask about my business, which had just secured its biggest client to date. That evening, I met my best friend Tyler for drinks at our favorite bar. Tyler and I had been friends since freshman year of college, and he had always been able to see through my family's carefully constructed facade. "Something weird is happening with Amanda's wedding," I told him, nursing a beer. "I feel like I'm being deliberately excluded." Tyler frowned. "Have they actually said anything?" "Not directly. But I was not invited to the engagement party, and whenever I offer to help with anything, they find reasons to say no." I took a long sip. My company just landed a contract with a Fortune 500 company, and my parents did not even pretend to care when I told them. "Maybe they're just stressed about the wedding," Tyler suggested, but his expression said he did not believe it either. The following weekend, my parents hosted a barbecue and invited both families. This time, I received an invitation, albeit at the last minute. When I arrived, I immediately felt the tension. Jackson's parents, the esteemed Dr. William Williams, and his wife Elaine, were holding court on the patio, surrounded by people eager to impress them. My father hovered nearby, laughing too loudly at Dr. Williams' jokes. When I approached to introduce myself, my mother suddenly appeared at my elbow. "Clarence, could you help me in the kitchen?" she asked, her smile tight. In the kitchen, there was nothing that actually needed doing. She busied herself rearranging perfectly arranged appetizer trays. "Mom, I was just going to introduce myself to Jackson's parents," I said. She did not meet my eyes. "Oh, they're very busy talking to everyone. You can meet them later." Later never came. Throughout the afternoon, I was somehow always directed elsewhere whenever I moved toward Jackson's family. When dinner was served, I found myself seated at the far end of the table with my parents, Amanda Jackson, and his parents clustered at the other end. As the weeks passed, the pattern continued. I received a formal invitation to the wedding, but when I asked Amanda about being a groomsman, she looked uncomfortable. "Jackson already has his brothers and cousins, plus some fraternity brothers," she explained. "The party is already quite large, so I was to be just another guest at my only sister's wedding." The knowledge stung more than I wanted to admit. One evening I overheard my father on the phone in his study. "Yes, we understand the expectations," Howard was saying tensely. "The Williams are very particular about the image they project. We are handling it, I assure you." There was a pause. "Clarence Island. Different. Has always marched to his own drummer. But we will make sure the wedding is not affected. Different." The word echoed in my head as I silently backed away from the door. What was so different about me that needed to be hidden? Was it my career choice? My slightly more casual style compared to the Brooks Brothers' uniformity of Jackson's family? Or was it something deeper, some fundamental way I had always failed to meet my parents' expectations? Tyler noticed my growing isolation. During our weekly basketball game, he stopped mid-dribble and fixed me with a serious look. "Clarence, what exactly is going on with your family?" he demanded. "You look like hell." I sank down onto the bench, suddenly exhausted. I told him everything, all the small cuts and exclusions that were adding up to something unmistakable. My family was ashamed of me. Tyler was outraged on my behalf. "That's messed up, man. Have you directly asked them what's going on?" I shook my head. Part of me did not want to hear the answer. But the situation was coming to a head, and we all knew it. 3 months before the wedding, with invitations sent and venues booked, my parents invited me over for dinner. "Just family," they said. "We need to talk about the wedding." I arrived with a knot in my stomach, sensing that whatever they wanted to discuss would change everything. The dining room was set with the good china crystal glasses gleaming under the chandelier light. My mother had prepared pot roast, my favorite meal from childhood. The forced normalcy of the scene only heightened my anxiety. Amanda sat with her eyes fixed on her plate, pushing food around without eating. My father cleared his throat repeatedly, a habit from when he was preparing to deliver bad news to clients. "How is the wedding planning going?" I asked, trying to break the unbearable tension. My mother brightened artificially. "Oh, everything is coming together beautifully. The Williams have been so generous. Dr. Williams is insisting on upgrading to the premium floral package, and Elaine found the most exquisite cake designer from New York." The small talk continued through the main course, focused entirely on wedding details that I had not been privy to. Not once did anyone ask about my life or business. When my mother served dessert homemade apple pie that she knew I loved, I knew the moment of truth was approaching. My father never allowed dessert before serious conversations. After several bites of pie, my father set down his fork with a decisive clink against fine china. "Clarence," he began, his voice formal, "we need to discuss your role in the upcoming wedding." I set down my own fork, appetite vanishing. What about my role? My father exchanged a look with my mother, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "The Williams family has certain expectations about this wedding," he continued. "Dr. Williams sits on several important boards, and many high-profile guests will be attending." And I prompted when he paused. My father sighed, his mask of politeness slipping. "The truth is, Clarence, you do not exactly fit the image that the Williams family is trying to project. Your lifestyle, your career choices, they are a bit too unconventional." The words hit like physical blows. Unconventional. Because I had started my own business instead of joining a corporate firm. Because I sometimes wore jeans instead of pressed slacks. "I do not understand," I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "What exactly about me is so embarrassing?" No one said embarrassing. My mother interjected quickly, her voice high and tight. "It's just that this wedding is very important for Amanda's future. The connections the Williams family can provide are invaluable." "More valuable than your son?" I asked quietly. My father's face hardened. "Do not be dramatic, Clarence. This is not about our feelings for you. It's about pragmatism. The Williams family moves in certain circles that have certain expectations. I looked at Amanda, who still had not spoken. Her eyes were fixed on the tablecloth, her face pale. "Amanda," I said softly, "is this how you feel too?" She finally looked up, tears swimming in her eyes. "I just want my wedding day to be perfect," she whispered, "without any complications." Complications. That was what I had been reduced to in my sister's eyes. A complication. My mother reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. "We were thinking, dear, that perhaps the greatest gift you could give your sister for her wedding island. Some space." What kind of space, I asked, though I already knew the answer. My father, never one to mince words, when the time for diplomacy was over, laid it out plainly. "The greatest gift for your sister's wedding is if you disappear from our family forever." The room went silent. Even my father seemed shocked by the baldness of his own statement, though he did not retract it. "Forever," I repeated, the word hollow in my mouth. "Well, perhaps not forever," my mother amended, quickly shooting my father a look, "but certainly for the wedding season. And perhaps for a while afterward, until things settle with the Williams family." But my father's slip had revealed the truth. This was not just about the wedding. This was the culmination of a lifetime of being the less favored child, the one who never quite fit their vision, the one they could now finally discard with a convenient excuse. I felt strangely calm as the truth settled over me. There was a certain relief in finally having confirmation of what I had suspected for years. "I see," I said quietly. "We can arrange for a nice vacation for you," my mother offered, her voice brittle with false brightness. "Somewhere exotic. All expenses paid, of course." "That won't be necessary," I replied. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. No one moved to stop me. As I walked upstairs to my old bedroom, where I still kept a few belongings, with methodical calm I packed a small bag with essential items and mementos. I could hear urgent whispers from downstairs, but could not make out the words. I did not try to. When I came back downstairs, bag in hand, my parents were standing in the foyer, Amanda slightly behind them. "Don't be hasty, Clarence," my father said, his tone now conciliatory. "We can discuss this further." "I think you've made yourselves perfectly clear," I replied. I reached into my pocket and removed my keychain. Among the keys was one that my parents had forgotten about, the key to a small apartment building that we had inherited from my grandmother. Technically, I owned 30% of the property, though. My parents managed it and collected the rent. I separated that key from my house key, placing only the house key on the entryway table. The sound it made against the wood seemed to echo in the silent house. "Goodbye," I said simply. I did not wait for their response. I did not beg for them to reconsider or lash out in anger. I simply walked to the door, opened it, and stepped through, closing it behind me with a soft click that felt like the period at the end of a very long sentence. In my car, I sat for a moment, hands steady on the wheel. Then I started the engine and drove away from the only family I had ever known, not looking back once in the rearview mirror. I drove straight to Tyler's apartment, the only place I could think to go. He took one look at my face and the bag in my hand and ushered me inside without questions. After pouring us both a generous whiskey, he sat across from me at his kitchen table. "They actually asked you to disappear?" he asked, after I had recounted the evening. "Forever." Those were my father's exact words, I confirmed, taking a long sip of whiskey. "The greatest gift for your sister's wedding is if you disappear from our family forever." Tyler swore colorfully. "That's beyond messed up, man. That's straight up evil." I stayed on Tyler's couch that night, sleeping surprisingly well considering the circumstances. Perhaps some part of me had been preparing for this rejection for years, storing away resilience for when I would need it most. In the morning, I woke with unexpected clarity. If my family wanted me gone, I would go, but on my terms. And I would ensure they understood the consequences of their decision. My first call was to a real estate attorney I had consulted when my company was looking for office space. By 9:30 in the morning, I was sitting in her office explaining my situation. "So you co-own this apartment building, and you want to sell your share?" she asked. "Actually, I want to sell the entire building," I clarified. My parents have forgotten that when Grandma Ruth died, her will specified that decisions about the property required unanimous consent from all owners, including me. The attorney smiled. She specialized in real estate disputes and clearly enjoyed the strategic challenge. By the end of our meeting, we had a plan. My next stop was the bank. The joint business account that funded the property management company holding the apartment building also contained a significant amount of cash flow. As a co-signer, I had every legal right to access it. I did not empty the account. I was not a thief. But I did freeze it pending the property sale and division of assets. By noon, I had secured a temporary apartment in a downtown high-rise, paying 3 months' rent up front. By 3 in the afternoon, I had met with a commercial real estate agent who was ecstatic about listing the apartment building located in an up-and-coming neighborhood that was attracting premium prices. The first call from my father came at 4:15. I watched his name flash on my phone screen, but did not answer. The first text from my mother arrived minutes later. "Please call us immediately. There seems to be some confusion with the property accounts." I waited until the following morning to respond, and when I did it was via email copying my attorney. The message was polite, businesslike, and devoid of emotion. "Howard and Dorothy, as per our discussion last night, I am taking steps to remove myself from family matters. This includes divesting my 30% ownership in the Ruth Gardner apartment property. A real estate agent has been engaged to sell the property, as is my right as a co-owner. The joint account has been temporarily frozen to ensure proper distribution of funds following the sale. My attorney will handle all communications regarding this matter going forward. Clarence." The explosion was immediate. My phone rang non-stop for 2 hours. I turned it off. When I turned it back on that evening, there were 27 voicemails and 43 text messages. Some were raging, some pleading, some threatening legal action. I forwarded them all to my attorney without listening or reading to the end. Within a week, I had secured a buyer for the apartment building, a developer eager to convert the units to luxury condos. The sale price was 30% above market value. My parents, faced with the reality that they could not stop the sale and would lose the steady income from the building regardless, finally agreed to the deal rather than face a protracted legal battle they would likely lose. With my share of the proceeds, I decided to make a clean break from Boston. My tech business was largely virtual, with clients across the country. There was nothing holding me there, except painful memories. Chicago had always appealed to me with its vibrant tech scene and straightforward Midwestern sensibility. 2 weeks after the night my family discarded me, I signed a lease on a loft in the West Loop and began the process of relocating. The money from the property sale provided a comfortable cushion, but I found satisfaction in knowing my business was more than sufficient to support me. The company had grown to 15 employees, all working remotely with a client list that was expanding monthly. The very career my parents had dismissed as unconventional was thriving. Despite the external trappings of success, the first few weeks in Chicago were deeply lonely. I threw myself into work, often staying at my computer until the early hours of the morning. I found an upscale gym and pushed my body to exhaustion, hoping physical fatigue would override emotional pain. I explored the city alone, walking for hours along the lakefront or through diverse neighborhoods, observing families and friends, together with a hollow ache in my chest. Tyler called regularly, providing the only connection to my old life. He had run into Amanda at a coffee shop, he told me, and she had seemed stressed and unhappy. She asked about you, he reported. Wanted to know if you were okay. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her she should ask you herself, he replied. She looked guilty as hell, man. I had received several texts from Amanda in the weeks since Id left. Unlike my parents' messages, which oscillated between rage and manipulation, hers were tentative and sad. I miss you, she wrote. I never wanted this. I did not respond. The wound was too fresh, her silent complicity too painful. My parents' messages took on a desperate tone when they realized the financial implications of my departure. The building sale had completed with each of us receiving our share of the proceeds. But the frozen joint account had been their primary source of liquid cash flow, and without it they were struggling to maintain their lifestyle and meet the escalating costs of the wedding. Clarence, this is childish, my father wrote. Your actions are punishing your sister for no reason. I almost laughed at the irony. They had asked me to disappear as a gift to my sister, yet now I was punishing her by doing exactly what they had requested. After a month of their increasingly frantic messages, I blocked their numbers and email addresses. My attorney would handle any necessary communications. I was building a new life, and their toxicity had no place in it. Alone in my Chicago loft with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, I would sometimes stand at night watching the lights of other apartments, imagining the families and relationships within those illuminated squares. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to fully recognize the conditional nature of my parents, love the subtle and not so subtle ways they had shown me. I was less valued than my sister. The recognition brought grief, but also freedom. I was no longer trying to earn love that had always been withheld. I was no longer measuring myself against impossible standards set by people who would never be satisfied. I was at 35 finally free to define success and happiness on my own terms. As the wedding date approached, I found myself thinking about it less. My new routine work gym, exploring Chicago's food scene, occasional socializing with neighbors in my building, had begun to feel natural. I had even gone on a few dates, though nothing serious had developed. Then 2 weeks before the wedding, a text came from an unknown number. It's Amanda. New phone. We need to talk, please. Against my better judgment, I replied. About what? Her response came immediately. Everything. Can I come to Chicago this weekend? After a long internal debate, I agreed. Whatever she had to say, perhaps hearing it would help me close this chapter of my life. The coffee shop I selected for our meeting was neutral territory. A busy place where the constant flow of customers would prevent any scene if emotions ran high. I arrived early, securing a table in the corner with a clear view of the door. When Amanda walked in, I almost did not recognize her. My vibrant, confident sister looked diminished somehow. She had lost weight and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She scanned the room anxiously before spotting me. Thank you for agreeing to see me, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. She clutched her coffee cup like a lifeline. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. Everything has fallen apart since you left, she blurted. Dad and Mom are fighting constantly. The wedding had to be scaled back dramatically because they cannot afford what they promised. Jackson's parents are furious. A petty part of me felt satisfaction at this news, but I kept my expression neutral. That sounds difficult, I said. Amanda looked down at her coffee. It's not just the money, though. When Jackson found out what they said to you, what they asked you to do, he was horrified. Absolutely horrified. This surprised me. He knows. She nodded miserably. I told him everything. I couldn't keep pretending. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The thing is, Clarence, it was all based on a lie. What do you mean? I asked. Amanda took a deep breath. Mom and Dad told the Williams that you were unstable, that you had anger issues and substance problems, that having you at the wedding would risk some kind of scene. She looked up, tears streaming now. They thought it would explain your absence better than the truth that they were ashamed of you for not fitting their image of success. The revelation should have hurt, but instead, I felt oddly detached, as if hearing about strangers. How profound the emotional distance had grown in just 3 months. The irony, Amanda continued, wiping her eyes, is that when Jackson told his parents the truth, they were furious at Mom and Dad, not at you. It turns out Dr. Williams has been following your company's work. He sits on the board of one of your clients. He was actually excited to meet the innovative tech entrepreneur in the family. I let that sink in. All this time, my parents had been projecting their own disappointment onto others, assuming everyone shared their narrow view of success. They had created a problem that never existed. I don't know what to say, I told her honestly. Jackson and I want you at the wedding, Amanda said, reaching across the table, but stopping short of touching my hand. His parents specifically asked that you be included. But I would understand if you refused. I studied my sister's face, searching for any sign of manipulation or insincerity. All I saw was exhaustion and regret. I'm not sure I can face them, I said finally. You wouldn't have to deal with Mom and Dad, she assured me quickly. You could be our guest, not theirs. Seated with Jackson's family even. The idea was tempting, if only to witness my parents' discomfort. But revenge was a poor reason to attend a wedding. Let me think about it, I said. Amanda nodded relief, evident in her expression. Thank you for even considering it. And Clarence, I'm so sorry. I should have stood up for you that night. I was a coward. Her apology, the first genuine one from any family member, cracked something in my carefully constructed wall. Yes, you should have, I agreed. But thank you for saying it now. We talked for another hour, Amanda filling me in on her life, asking questions about Chicago and my business. For brief moments, it felt like talking to the sister I had grown up with before family dynamics poisoned our relationship. When we parted, she hugged me tightly. Whatever you decide about the wedding, I hope this isn't the last time we talk, she said. I made no promises, but found myself considering her invitation seriously in the days that followed. Tyler, when I called to ask his advice, was uncharacteristically measured. If you go do it for yourself, and Amanda not to prove anything to your parents, he counseled, and have an exit strategy if it gets uncomfortable. After much deliberation, I decided to attend. Not for revenge or validation, but to support my sister, and to face the situation that had altered the course of my life. I would not hide or disappear, as my parents had wanted. I would stand tall in the life I had built for myself. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright in Boston. I had flown in late the night before checking into a hotel rather than staying with family or friends. I dressed carefully in a tailored suit, examining my reflection with critical eyes. I looked good, successful, confident. The months of rigorous gym workouts had added definition to my frame, and the release from constant familial disapproval had erased the perpetual tension from my face. The ceremony was being held at the Williams Family Church, a historic stone building in Boston's Back Bay. As instructed by Amanda, I arrived early and was greeted by an usher who escorted me not to the general seating but to a reserved section at the front. Mr. Williams would like you to sit with the family, the usher explained, leading me to a pew where Jackson's parents and relatives were already gathering. Dr. Williams, a distinguished man in his 60s, stood to greet me with a warm handshake. Clarence, we've heard so much about you from Jackson. Your work on encrypted payment systems is fascinating." His wife Elaine smiled genuinely. "We're so glad you could make it. Amanda will be thrilled." Their welcome was so natural and kind that I momentarily wondered if I had entered an alternate universe. These were the supposedly judgmental status conscious people my parents had been so afraid of offending. As the church filled, I felt the weight of stares. Word of my family estrangement had clearly spread, creating a ripple of whispers as guests recognized me. I kept my gaze forward, shoulders straight. Then my parents entered, walking together down the aisle toward the front pew on the bride's side. My mother spotted me first, her step faltering visibly. She clutched my father's arm, whispering urgently. He turned, his face freezing in shock when he saw me seated with the Williams family. I nodded politely in their direction, then returned my attention to the program in my hands. From the corner of my eye, I could see them engaged in tense conversation with the wedding coordinator gesturing in my direction. Whatever they were attempting, it was too late. The music had begun signaling the start of the ceremony. The wedding itself was beautiful in its simplicity, far less ostentatious than the extravaganza that had been originally planned. Amanda, radiant in a classic gown, smiled through tears when she spotted me during her procession. Jackson looked at her with undisguised adoration, and their vows, which they had written themselves, spoke of partnership, respect, and supporting each other through life's challenges. At the reception held in the gardens of the Williams family home, I maintained a careful distance from my parents. It wasn't difficult, as they seemed equally determined to avoid me hovering anxiously at the edges of conversations whenever I was nearby. Dr. Williams, however, made a point of introducing me to several people, including partners at his medical practice and board members from various organizations. Each time he mentioned my company with genuine admiration. "Clarence has developed security systems that several of our medical facilities use," he told one colleague. "Revolutionary approach to data protection." During the dinner, I was seated at a table with Jackson's cousins and friends, all of whom treated me with the natural friendliness of people unaware of any family drama. The normalcy was both soothing and painful, highlighting what had been missing in my own family. The most surprising moment came during the speeches. After the traditional toasts from the best man and maid of honor, Jackson himself stood, champagne glass in hand. "There's one more person I want to thank," he said, his gaze finding me in the crowd. "Clarence, my new brother-in-law. Not everyone knows that Clarence faced some significant challenges to be here today." He raised his glass in my direction. "Your presence means the world to Amanda and me. To Clarence, whose integrity and strength of character I admire deeply." A murmur ran through the crowd as people turned to look at me. I nodded acknowledgement, touched by the unexpected public recognition. Across the room, my parents sat rigid with discomfort. My mother's smile frozen. My father's face darkening with anger. After the cake cutting, as guests began to move between tables and onto the dance floor, I found myself momentarily alone by the garden terrace. A shadow fell across me, and I turned to find my father standing there, my mother a few steps behind him. "You had to come and make a statement, didn't you?" he said, voice low, but vibrating with anger. "Always have to be the center of attention." "I was invited by the bride and groom," I replied calmly, "and by Dr. Williams specifically." My mother stepped forward, her hand fluttering anxiously at her throat. "Clarence, dear, we should talk privately. This scene you're causing." "I'm not causing any scene," I countered. "I'm simply attending my sister's wedding as a guest. Isn't that what family does?" "Family also protects each other," my father hissed. "Your little financial stunt nearly ruined this entire event. Do you know how much we've had to scramble to salvage things?" I met his gaze steadily. "You asked me to disappear from the family forever. I simply took you at your word and made arrangements accordingly." "We didn't mean it literally," my mother protested, tears welling. "It was just the stress of the wedding planning." I shook my head. It was the truth finally spoken aloud. The culmination of a lifetime of making me feel less than unwanted. Embarrassing. Don't pretend otherwise. My father's face flushed dark red. You always were too sensitive, twisting everything to make yourself the victim. Something in me snapped at the familiar gaslighting. No, I said, my voice suddenly strong and clear. You don't get to rewrite history. You told me to disappear because you were ashamed of me. You lied to Jackson's family about me having problems. You've been dismissing and minimizing me my entire life. My father started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. For years, I tried to earn your approval by being the perfect son. Nothing was ever good enough. Not valedictorian, not MIT, not building a successful company. I was always the disappointment. The one who didn't quite fit. They stared at me in shock, unused to such direct confrontation. The funny thing is, I continued, you were so worried about what the Williams would think of me when it turns out they actually respect what I've built. The problem was never them. It was you. My mother began to cry in earnest now. Clarence, please, we can work this out. Come home. I shook my head. I have a home. I've built a life for myself in Chicago. A good one. My father's facade finally crumbled. The truth is, he admitted reluctantly, I've been jealous. You did what I never had the courage to do. Start your own business. Live life on your terms. It was easier to criticize than to admit that. His unexpected honesty momentarily stunned me into silence. My mother looked down at her clasped hands, and I was so concerned with appearances, with what others might think. I let that override what should have mattered most, my own son. Their admissions came far too late to erase years of damage, but they were something, perhaps the beginning of a truth that could lead somewhere new. I have no interest in revenge, I told them. But I won't return to a relationship based on conditional acceptance either. If you want me in your lives going forward, it will be on new terms, with boundaries and respect. They nodded, subdued by the finality in my voice. We can talk more after the honeymoon, I said, effectively ending the conversation. Today is about Amanda and Jackson. As I walked away, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. I had said my piece, without rancor or drama, standing firmly in my truth. Whatever happened next, I would face it from a position of strength, not need. The remainder of the reception passed in a blur of music, dancing, and conversations with people I'd just met, but who seemed genuinely interested in knowing me. Amanda found me as the evening was winding down, pulling me into a quiet corner. I saw you talking with Mom and Dad, she said, concern evident in her eyes. Was it awful? Actually, it was surprisingly honest, I told her. Maybe the first honest conversation we've ever had. She squeezed my hand. I meant what I said before. I want you in my life, Clarence. I've missed my big brother. I miss the sister who used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms, I admitted. She's still here, Amanda said, tears glistening. Just a bit lost along the way. When the newlyweds departed in a shower of rose petals, I said my goodbyes to the Williams family, who extracted promises to keep in touch and visit Chicago. Dr. Williams even mentioned potential business opportunities he'd like to discuss. That night in my hotel room, I reflected on the day's events with a strange sense of peace. I had faced my fears and my family, and I had done so with dignity. The future of our relationship remained uncertain, but for the first time I felt I had the power to define its terms. The following morning, I had breakfast with Tyler before my flight back to Chicago. So your parents actually admitted they were wrong, he asked incredulously. Never thought I'd see the day. It doesn't erase what happened, I said, but it's a start. And the famous Williams family turned out to be your biggest fans, he chuckled. The irony is almost too perfect. After returning to Chicago, I threw myself back into work and my new life with renewed energy. Amanda and Jackson sent postcards from their honeymoon in Greece, followed by regular texts and calls after they returned. Our relationship, freed from the toxic dynamics of our parents' influence, began to heal and grow into something more authentic than before. My parents, true to the pattern of our entire relationship, vacillated in their approach. Some days brought tentative, respectful messages asking about my life in Chicago. Other days brought subtle guilt trips or passive-aggressive comments about family loyalty. I responded to the former and ignored the latter, maintaining the boundaries I had established. 3 months after the wedding, they asked if they could visit Chicago. After careful consideration, I agreed with clear parameters. They would stay in a hotel, not my apartment, and we would spend limited time together over a weekend. Their arrival at my office on that Friday afternoon was a study in contrasts to our last encounter. My father, visibly impressed by the sleek workspace and busy staff, struggled to reconcile the reality of my success with his long-held doubts. My mother, more adaptable as always, complimented everything effusively, perhaps overcompensating for past dismissals. I gave them a brief tour, introducing them to key team members who knew nothing of our history and treated them with the natural respect due to a boss's parents. The normalcy of the interaction seemed to settle something in both of them. Over dinner, that evening, at one of Chicago's finest restaurants, my choice, my reservation, my treat, all deliberately established, we navigated careful conversation about neutral topics: Chicago architecture, local politics, Amanda and Jackson's new home. It wasn't until our second dinner the following night that we broached the subject of our fractured relationship. This time, in the privacy of a quiet restaurant booth, my father made an unprecedented move. He apologized simply and directly. "I was wrong, Clarence," he said, meeting my eyes across the table. "What I said that night was unforgivable. I don't expect you to forget it, but I hope you can eventually forgive it." My mother reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand as she had always done. "We both failed you terribly," she admitted. "I let my social anxieties and insecurities dictate how I treated my own son. That's unforgivable." I studied them both, searching for the manipulation or insincerity I had grown accustomed to detecting. What I saw instead were two aging parents, confronting the consequences of their actions perhaps for the first time. "I can't just flip a switch and trust you again," I told them honestly. "Trust is rebuilt slowly, through consistent actions, not words." They nodded, accepting this reality without protest. "But I'm willing to try," I continued, "on my terms, with boundaries that you both respect." "Anything," my mother said quickly. "We just want a chance." Over the following months, we established a new rhythm: weekly phone calls, occasional visits, email updates about work and life. They made efforts I had never seen before, asking questions about my business and actually listening to the answers, remembering details about my Chicago friends, sending thoughtful gifts for my birthday instead of the generic gift cards of years past. Were they perfect? Far from it. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced, requiring firm but calm correction. But they were trying, and in their effort, I found something I hadn't expected: the space to see them as flawed humans rather than the all-powerful parents who had shaped my self-worth. The greatest surprise came 6 months after the wedding, when my father called with news he was retiring early and using part of his retirement fund to invest in my company's newest expansion. "I trust your vision, Clarence," he said simply. I should have long ago. 1 year after the night my parents asked me to disappear, my life in Chicago had transformed from an emergency escape into a thriving new chapter. My company had doubled in size, with a second office opening in Austin and clients across 3 continents. My loft no longer felt like a temporary shelter, but a true home filled with artwork from local Chicago artists and furniture I had carefully selected to reflect my personal style. More importantly, I had built connections that felt more authentic than many of the relationships I'd left behind in Boston. My neighbor Emma, a graphic designer, had become a close friend after we bonded over a shared love of obscure science fiction films. My regular pickup basketball game at the local gym had evolved into a tight-knit group that met for drinks afterwards. My business partner Damon had relocated from Boston to Chicago, bringing his family and adding another layer to my support system. Together, these people formed what I had come to think of as my chosen family people, who accepted me exactly as I was without conditions or expectations. My relationship with Amanda had evolved into something deeper and more honest than our childhood bond. Freed from our parents' comparative dynamic, we spoke weekly, sharing not just the surface details of our lives, but also our struggles, fears, and ambitions. She and Jackson had visited Chicago twice, and I had returned to Boston for weekend visits that deliberately included minimal contact with our parents. As for Howard and Dorothy, I had begun thinking of them by their first names, a small but significant mental shift. Our relationship remained a work in progress. Some days brought genuine connection and moments of the parental support I had always craved. Other days triggered old wounds and required careful navigation of boundaries. I had begun seeing a therapist, something I'd resisted for years despite Tyler's suggestions. Dr. Rosario specialized in family trauma and had helped me recognize patterns I'd never noticed: how I overworked to prove my worth, how I held people at arm's length to avoid rejection, how I dismissed compliments because I'd been conditioned to believe I never quite measured up. With her guidance, I was slowly untangling the complex web of emotions surrounding my family. The anger, the hurt, the lingering desire for approval I was still working to release. The hardest lesson, and the one I continued to struggle with daily, was accepting that I might never receive the unconditional love from my parents that every child deserves. But the corresponding freedom was learning that I no longer needed it to feel whole. In April, exactly 1 year after the confrontation that had changed everything, I launched a mentorship program through my company, specifically designed for young tech entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. Working with these determined young people, sharing not just technical knowledge, but also lessons in resilience and self-advocacy, became the most rewarding part of my professional life. I thought often about the irony of my situation. My parents had asked me to disappear as a gift to my sister. In doing so, they had inadvertently given me the greatest gift, the push I needed to break free from patterns that had limited me for decades. The apartment building that had provided my financial cushion during the transition had been replaced by something more valuable: confidence in my own abilities and worth. The frozen joint account that had caused such family chaos had led to honest conversations that might otherwise have been avoided for years. Even the pain of rejection had served a purpose, forcing me to examine what family truly meant and what kind of relationships I wanted to cultivate going forward. Forgiveness remained complicated. There were days when the memory of that dinner, of the casual cruelty of my father's words, would surface unexpectedly, bringing with it a fresh wave of hurt. But I was learning that forgiveness wasn't a single decision but a daily practice, something I did more for my own peace than for those who had wronged me. On a clear Chicago evening, standing on my balcony overlooking the city I now called home, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The person I had become: stronger, more authentic, more compassionate, had emerged from the ashes of rejection. I had not just survived being discarded by my family. I had used it as a catalyst to build a life more aligned with my true self. Perhaps that was the most profound lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to walk away from those who cannot love us, as we deserve to create space for those who can. Sometimes a closed door is not an ending, but the first sentence of a better story. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a profound betrayal? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content like this, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. Thank you for being part of my healing journey sometimes. Knowing we're not alone in our struggles is the first step toward finding our way forward.